Okay. Tov, hello again. Okay, after the great lecture of Professor Zackerson, I'm sorry, I might be a little bit more boring than he was. I don't have music, but I'll try to keep you in business. Today I'll present part of my PhD thesis that was done under the supervision of Professor Israel Hershkovitz from the Anatomy and Anthropology Department from the medical school, and Professor Alexander Verdimon, the head of the Orthodontic Department. My PhD have many implications, but I chose the ones that have the least to do with orthodontics. Before I start, I just want to say one remark, that whatever data I'm presenting today is based on scientific terms and has no implication regarding religious aspects. I would like to... Huh? God will help us. Okay. I would like to share with you a very interesting story. A story that took place not far from where we stand today, 12 kilometers from Tel Aviv, near Rosh Ha'ain. At the year of 2000, a group of workers started another ordinary day in road paving. What they didn't know is that what started like another regular day will result in one of the greatest discoveries to the human development study. During their work, an ancient cave was accidentally found. Scientists determined that the cave is 200 to 400,000 years of age. This was the Kesem cave. You can see here the group of people that were excavating in the cave. And in the excavation, many handpieces were found, as we can see here. And another interesting finding was they found 7 teeth. But if we want to know who used those teeth, we need to know who lived in that time, in that area, in the Kesem cave or in the Middle East. So let's try together and investigate who lived in that time. So this is taken from Nature, this map, and it represents the consensus regarding the development of the Homo sapiens and Neanderthal. As you can see here, the Homo sapiens in gray is originated from Africa at about 200,000 years ago, and afterwards spread to Eurasia at about 65 to 90,000 years of age. This is the area of Kesem Cave, meaning that the Homo sapiens arrived to our area at about 100,000 years ago. And when we look at the Neanderthal, we can see that it's originated from Eurasia at about the same dates as the Homo sapiens. So now, back to our question. Who lived in the Kesem cave? Who used that cave? So in order to evaluate that, we need to investigate the teeth that were found. So we can see here one tooth from the Kesem cave. They found 7 teeth in the excavation. We can see one tooth here from different sides. And now we need to determine who belonged those teeth. So in order to do that, we have several dental triads we can use. We can study the shape of the crown. We can study the shape of the root. We can study the size. We can study the attrition of the tooth. Enamel is a very special tissue. Unlike bone, that is a repairable tissue and changes throughout life, teeth is a non-repairable tissue. And once there is attrition or grinding of the tooth, it stays like this forever, unless we put laminates. But since they didn't do that back then, so whatever happens to a tooth stays forever. Also, teeth are very well preserved. And that's why we can see those teeth that are 200,000 years old. When we tried to evaluate those teeth, we looked at a new triad that was hardly documented before, and that is the interproximal attrition. Interproximal means the side of the tooth. the area between two adjacent teeth. And here you can see the attrition that happens in the side of the tooth. It's actually the loss of enamel between two adjacent teeth. So again, let's understand a little bit more about the interproximal attrition. Interproximal attrition, this is a skull of a child, modern child. You can see the contact between two teeth. You can see a very small contact. But with life and with age, we can see the increase in the contact, which results from the interproximal attrition. And when you grow older, we can see the change of the attrition and the increase in the contact between the two adjacent teeth. Many things can affect the interproximal attrition, which later we're going to discuss it a little bit more. But mainly, the main effect is the food. Once the food is more abrasive, is more hard to chew, and we need to use harder forces and more mastication forces, and more forces are applied upon the teeth, then we get more attrition. So if we look at the prehistoric time, when they were hunter-gatherers, and the food was very hard and very hard to chew, the attrition was quite severe. Later on, when agriculture began and people started cooking and the food was more soft, the diet was more softer, then we had less attrition. And we see the reduction in the interproximal attrition with the years. Okay. So the study objectives, first, in order to learn the ancient populations, we have to know recent populations in order to have data to compare it to. So we wanted to establish a reliable method for evaluation of the interproximal attrition, to characterize the interproximal attrition morphologically and numerically, and to reveal its association with several demographical parameters such as age, gender, and ethnicity. In order to do so, I went to study a large collection of modern population, and I did it with the help of the Fulbright Foundation, with the help of the Dan David Laboratory. I went to the Cleveland Museum of Natural History in the United States, where they have the largest documented osteologic collection of humans and apes, close to 4,000 skulls, very well documented, with age known, ethnicity, and gender. Age at death of the objects were 17 to 76. They were born between the years 1825 and 1910, and they were mostly coal miners with low socioeconomic status. I spent in that museum 2 months. My husband stayed with the children. He spent time with them at home, quality time. He enjoyed it a lot. And as you see, I also had a great time. I had to survey the entire collection of 4,000 skulls, one by one, and to find the skulls that could match the research. I chose the ones with full dentition, with different ages, from both genders and ethnicity. Some had to be excluded because of standard deviation issues. So what I actually did in simple words, I took out of the jaw 2 adjacent teeth and studied the proximal wall directly. I wanted to see the proximal facet directly on the tooth. As you can see here, I took it out, and here you can see the proximal facet. And this is another proximal facet. And then, when I could see the proximal facet, I could do the measurements that I wanted. I could measure to characterize the proximal attrition in matters of size, shape, location of the facet, and also compare it to demographic parameters, corneal morphometrics, and dental pathologies. Well, I'm going to go to explain you some of the results, not a lot, and we'll try to understand the implication of the results. So first, I measured the size. This is how it seems in the computerized program. I measured the interproximal size. As you can see here, there's a difference in the size between different teeth. The more posterior teeth has larger interproximal attrition facets. It means that as much as the teeth is in the back of the mouth, closer to the muscles, to the mastication muscles, the attrition increases. When you're trying to understand why is it beneficial to have a larger contact, we can see that when the contact is small, the force applied on the tooth can cause concentration of stresses in the interproximal area and can cause breakage or fracture to the marginal ridge or to the proximal wall. But when we look at this picture, this figure, we can see that when the contact is greater, force distribution is much better. The shape, we found three main shapes in the facets, in the proximal facets: the round shape, the oval shape, and the kidney shape. There was a difference in the size of those shapes. The round shape was always the smallest. The oval was larger, and the kidney was the largest. Meaning, the contact is dynamic. It starts, we believe, it starts at the round shape, and with time and with food chewing and the mastication forces, the teeth grind and move in certain directions, and this results in the progress from shape to shape, from the round to the oval and to the kidney. So looking at the shape can actually give us some kind of a map of the movements that the teeth feel, if you can say that. We can learn what kind of forces were applied upon the teeth that caused this particular shape. Another measurement that we did, we scanned the interproximal facet and the proximal wall in the electron microscope. And it was very interesting to see that in the same proximal wall, with the same enamel of the same tooth, we characterized three different patterns of enamel. In the top, we can see the area on purple above the proximal facet. And we can see the scratches of the enamel. That are the result of, again, the food and maybe toothbrushing. This is a modern tooth, so maybe toothbrushing that affecting the enamel. On the bottom, in red, we can see the area below the facet. And we can see it's very similar to enamel that was etched, that had an acidic environment, meaning that this area of the tooth is exposed to an acidic environment. And when we look at the proximal facet itself, we can see a very polished, bright area with no scratches and with no etched appearance. And this is the result of those two things together. The combination between the interproximal attrition, the mechanical attrition, and the presence of acid resulting in this unique pattern. Another parameter that we studied is the facial pattern. We measured the skull. I'm giving here just two measurements, but we measured it from all kinds of directions and measurements. And as you can see, we measured the width of the skull and the width of the jaw. And we saw that when, as much as the skull was wider and the jaw was wider, the interproximal attrition was larger. When you try to understand why is it so, we know from the literature that brachiocephalic pattern has higher mastication force, meaning that, again, it has to do with muscle and the mastication force. When we have a brachiocephalic pattern, meaning a wide face, the muscles are wider. And when the muscles are wider, the masticatory forces are greater. And that is why we get an increase in the interproximal attrition. So now, when I get a tooth, I might be able to determine, or at least evaluate, the size, or to get some evaluation of the size of the cranium and the face. So again, let's go back to the Kesem teeth. So we still have this rhino. Who used this tooth? Where did it come from? Is it a Neanderthal? Or is it a Homo sapiens? And when we look now at the interproximal attrition, we can see a very interesting pattern. When we look at the Neanderthal, we can see that they have a very specific pattern of attrition. They have some vertical grooves on their interproximal wall, which is also related to the food and the masticatory forces. We can see the Kesem tooth with a very polished proximal facet, and when we compare it to a modern tooth, we can see the similarity between those two patterns. So we suggest that it might be that the Kesem tooth belongs to a Homo sapiens. And it was published in the AJPA 2010. And this article was actually a breakthrough. It was challenging the consensus. As you can see, and I will explain you why. Again, back to our map. As we said, this is the area of Kesem, and we used to think that the Homo sapiens arrived to this area at about 100,000. But if we know that the Kesem cave is 200 to 400,000, it means that the Homo sapiens arrived to our area, to the Middle East, much earlier, much sooner than we think. And that means that maybe the origin of the Homo sapiens is not 200,000, or maybe much earlier, maybe 400,000. Challenging the consensus, there are responses, as you can see, all over the world, in different languages. Do you recognize the languages? Because I hope I took the right articles. That was Greek and Norway. Okay? Portugal? No? You saw? Okay. Was Israel the birthplace of modern humans? It has long been believed that modern humans emerged from the continent of Africa 200,000 years ago. Now, Tel Aviv University archaeologists have uncovered evidence that Homo sapiens roamed the land now called Israel as early as 400,000 years ago, the earliest evidence for the existence of modern humans anywhere in the world. So now, we don't stop here. We need to think to the future study. And now we're working on a new device that will simulate the attrition between two teeth. In yellow, we can see the teeth. And by this machine, we can try and evaluate the forces, the acidic environment, the movements that can cause each pattern of attrition. And by that, to gain some more knowledge regarding this phenomena. And I would like to thank, again, my father, who designed this machine. Now I'm not crying, you see. And I want to thank my supervisors of the PhD thesis, Professor Hershkovitz and Professor Vardimon, and the members of the Anatomy and Anthropology lab that helped me a lot. And to thank again my family and my children. Thank you very much.